Good morning, America. Good afternoon, West Africa. Good evening, East Africa, and South Africa, from anywhere that you are joining this meeting. You are welcome to this maiden event, the first of hopefully continuous series of the policy fireside chat focused on Africa. I am the convener of this event. My name is Bola Akonji. I am a professor of macroeconomics and gender studies at the Quinnipiac University, and I'm an international development consultant focusing mainly on agriculture and economic women in agriculture, gender and development. I think for now, that is the much you need to know about me. I spent 25 years as a research professor at the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research. So my interest has always been on African economies, and I welcome you. Now, this initiative, the Policy Fireside Chat, is one initiative that works through partnerships. And today, we are we are partnering with the Africa Disruption Lab, which is founded by Professor Funke Mujuba-Oluokome, who is also going to be the moderator on this program. Professor Okome, uh, well, I know Professor Okume as a tough cookie, a professor of political science and gender and African studies at the Brooklyn College, City University of New York. But Professor Okume, you may want to tell us one or two more things that may pique our interest, especially for future interactions. Thank you. You have the floor, Prof.
Oh, well, I'm a professor, like you have heard. I also, for me, gender is not something that you just theorize about. It's how you live your life. And I believe in women's rights. I actually don't call myself a feminist for, you know, deep intellectual reasons of resistance to Western framing of the gender agenda. And I'm quite comfortable with people disagreeing and, being very upset that you are a woman, you are doing women's rights, and you don't say you are a feminist. So I think African framing of the issues that we confront in ways that reinforce the idea that gender is socially constructed is important. And oftentimes we forget that and we buy into dominant narratives, and it disadvantages a lot of the ways in which we can respond to our pressing issues. So
Thank you,
thank you.
Prof.
Welcome.
Thank you, Prof. We'll go on to the other distinguished panelists. I think I'm going to start from the top. The first person I have to my left is Awal Musa Rafsanjani, who is the Executive Director of CISLAC, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, based in Abuja and indeed all over Nigeria and Africa. Raf, you are welcome to introduce yourself. 1 minute. Raf, oh my God. Is he muted? Did I lose Raf? Okay, I'll go to the next person, Oreolu Afawole. Can you hear me? Hello, you're muted. You're muted. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. My name is Oreolu Afawole, as Prof introduced. I'm the founder, executive director for Master Skills. I am professionally, I'm a business and product developer, but I like to refer to myself as someone who likes to use technology to solve social problems. So often known as a techpreneur. Currently, my work at Master Skills is at the intersection of youth employment, technology, and the future of work. So I work closely with young professionals, job seekers, and small businesses where we explore how skills verification, technology, and task-based assessments can open opportunities for young people across Africa. So I also work as a co-founder in a climate tech startup where I also engage and interact with local communities and youths where we try to help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. So that's a brief introduction from me.
You're welcome, Mr. Fawley, and happy birthday. I learned today's your birthday. You deserve a shout out. Now we're going to Dr. Adamesh Bugali.
Thank you, Bola. My name is Adamnesh Vogale, and I currently lead the Gender Equality Program at the African Center for Economic Transformation, ASSET. At ASSET, what I do is my work generally sits at the intersection of gender equality and economic transformation and governance. Here we look at how power institutions and economic policy shape opportunities for both women and men across African economies. By background, I am also a lawyer, and I studied development. And much of my research, past research and policy work mainly focuses on migration and also the political economy of gender and gender and migration, particularly on the political economy of gender, on the issues of care economy, GRB, and shared power. Thank you, Bola.
Thank you, Adamesh. And next is Professor Jacob Olupono.
I'm Jacob Kende Olupona, professor at Harvard University. My PhD research in the 70s was in Ondo, mythically the only Yoruba kingdom founded by a woman. And that threw up a big challenge. But it allowed me to also connect with younger scholars who are doing gender to go there and, do more intensive study of that. People were shocked that I could send PhD students to study in the same place where I did my doctorate. It was because I believed that something was missing in the work I did at first. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Sir. Yeah, I mean, you obviously are not afraid to tread where lions are roaring. Yes, I'll go on to to Dr. Kehinde Ajayi. She's to my extreme right.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. Greetings, everybody. And it's great to see you, Professor Lupona, as well. I am a senior economist at the Center for Global Development, a senior fellow at the Center for Global Development, and director of our program on gender equality and inclusion. And I was born in Boston, so my parents actually were at Boston the same time as Professor Lupona was doing his work, but grew up in Nairobi and came to the US for studies. I'm an economist by training, and I started off my career in academia. So I taught at Boston University for several years before moving to the World Bank and now to the Center for Global Development. And our work really focuses on an aspect of gender equality that I think a lot of people don't a lot of people in the gender equality and the feminist spaces don't think about, which is financing and thinking about the funding side of things. So we've been doing a lot of work lately, understanding what's happening in the global financing space, how a lot of the cuts on gender funding are impacting women and girls' well-being and impacting gender equality. Another aspect of my work, which I've collaborated with Adamnesh on, is understanding indigenous insights on gender equality, and hopefully something we'll talk about now. A lot of people talk about, or in this current backlash, are framing equality as being against traditional values or African values, where we know very well that African society is among the most progressive in terms of gender equality. When you think about indigenous values, indigenous organizing systems and structures and processes. So that's something that I'm very interested in, and hopefully we'll talk more about. Thank you very much for having me here and for this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Ajaya. And last but not the least is Awa Musa Rafsanjani. Raf, you disappeared for a while. I hope you're back.
Yeah, Prof. So good morning, everyone. My name is Awal Musa Rafsanjani. I have been, a development activist worker. I started being involved in the women's struggle right from my year one in the university in 1989 when I joined Women in Nigeria. Women in Nigeria was one of the most progressive women organization that actually, work on gender justice in Nigeria. And ever since then, I've been involved, in various, struggle that has to do with addressing women inequality, injustice, and women opportunities. So in my younger days, when I was working with the both CAP and the Center for Democracy and Development, I've been also working to sustain and consolidate the call for gender justice and equality in Nigeria. When we set up CISLAC, which is my current organization, we also focus a lot on women issues. And before then, actually, I was one of the pioneer, staff of CDD that worked with Professor, Bola to begin to work on gender budgeting in Nigeria. It was a new concept at that time, but, we work extensively to bring about issues around gender budgeting. And then, I continue with that. So when, also I become the director, of CISLAC, I still continue to work with the professor, like Professor Komi. We, work with them to also put a publication on women in politics, which she and Dr. Apia Zakia, edited. And ever since then, I continue to champion, this. Currently, I am the board of
Wrap,
trustee chair of Amnesty
wrap
International.
up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Currently, I'm
You,
the
you,
board of trustee chair of Amnesty International and also head of Transparency International in Nigeria and numerous other organizations that are all working for social justice, equality and democratization in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. When I hold up my thumb, it's like your time is up. But since you have 7 to 10 minutes for your main submission, I'm going to subtract that. So, yes, thank you. Welcome, everybody, and our audience that are building up. We are so happy to have you here. Let me spend a few minutes talking about this concept of the fireside chat, the policy fireside chat, and why we're starting it today. What's a fireside chat? For many of us who know, the fireside chat started with Professor Franklin Roosevelt during the Great Depression when the main media was essentially fractured, but he needed to reach out to the ordinary Americans, speak to them, speak with them, those that were being affected. So he started a radio station, which he called the Fireside Chat, and that has caught on. So Fireside Chats take on this meaning of a relaxed, free, open space for open and honest discussion dedicated to amplifying otherwise silent development concerns. So that is our framework, that is our model in this policy fire chat. We aim to encourage free expression on hot button issues, not just on gender, but on anything that appears to be concerning, and where it's going to be participatory, where you, me, eggheads, the working class African, protagonists, antagonists can share their views with the ultimate aim of reaching a clearer understanding of one another. I think we're going to have better polity, better governance at that. More importantly, the chat will not just be armchair criticisms like we like to do in Africa around our suya fire and whatever and wine and yeah, it's going to move on to we are going to escalate the outcomes to institutional space, including through verified research findings and to support new conceptual frames and rationales, where policies, especially gender policies, can be reinvented to be more inclusive. So our topic for today, the first Maiden Fireside Chat, is on a topical, topic, the gender backlash. And what we're asking today is that, is there a gender backlash, especially in the African context? Is it real? Is it imagined? Indeed, is it justified if we say that there is a gender backlash? Now, I will touch on the importance of starting this forum, maybe today, this month of March. It is particularly relevant to what is happening in the world this month. This month, as we all know, is the Women's History Month. It is the month of the International Women's Day. It is the month of the Commission on the Status of Women, which is currently ongoing at the United Nations headquarters. It is the month of the Mothering Sunday, especially for women of faith. And it is the month of a significant occasion in history, which happened tomorrow, about 400 years ago, the assassination of Julius Caesar, the powerful emperor of Rome, by his inner cabinet on the floor of the People's House, the Roman Congress. It's the first known palace coup, and it was intended to wrestle democracy from autocracy. So although as we know from the history, the incident turned on its head, unfortunately, for decades, Rome was in turmoil, but it eventually led to the reinventing of democracy in Rome, which has spread all over the world. So perhaps without the turmoil in Rome, governance would not have had the chance to reinvent itself into the true democracy that we have today. And the start of the transformation of democracy is that day on the Ides of March. On a personal level, for those who know me here on this platform, I was also born on the Ides of March 70 years ago. So yes, I think you can say happy birthday to me as well in advance. It is always a day of excitement for me and those who know me, especially my classmates from Queen's School, who read Julius Caesar. We read Julius Caesar together, and this day is always a day of excitement for them. Beware the Ides of March. The Ides of March are here, but not yet done. So we are welcoming the Ides of March tomorrow, especially during this month of March. So of course, we cannot talk about democracy today. We can continue to celebrate it, but what democracy is turning into today is probably beyond our imagination. But we still have hope that democracy will continue to reinvent itself. Now, I'm going to ask for permission to go into some nitty-gritty, some conceptual, some techie part of this discussion to lay a foundation of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share my screen and talk to some issues that other panelists may talk into later. So I'm going to share my screen and I think I'm going to start here. Okay. So, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I see a caption is the gender backlash confronting systemic pushback. And first, I will just say that there is an illusion of progress. If we look at data, mostly all over the world, we find that there is progress in the achievement of gender equality. The graph is trending upwards in most areas of development, education, health, economic participation, and so many other things. So the gender equality index, is ticking up. If you look at the global gender index, the human development gender index, the African gender development index, you see an upward trend. But what we fail to see is what data is not telling us. Now we're looking at a trend of increment. We are not looking at the rate of that trend, the rate of change, which is the one that actually signifies progress. So we find that underneath the seeming progress, there is seething backlash that is gradually drawing down, reducing the rate of change of what we need. Ordinarily, we would perhaps be achieving total equality at a given time, but with the underlying backlash, it will probably take us longer to get there. So I would like to talk about how backlash occurs. What is a backlash? A backlash is an organized pushback or negative reaction against a change or reform in which a group perceives itself as gaining ground or power. It usually appears when previously marginalized groups make visible progress in rights, resources, or voice, and those advances are seen by some as a threat. Now, it can be loud, it can be, that is silent, it can be overt, but it occurs in different forms. Now, I'm going to go through what I call a mind map of yeah. I'm going to share another aspect of my screen. Okay. The mind map of a backlash, of the gender backlash. Okay. So the gender backlash usually, occurs, like I said, as organized pushback, negative reaction to progress, and is often systemic and coordinated, and is perceived as a threat to power. It manifests, like I said, either overtly or quietly, silently, the more dangerous. And of course, we have global trends in backlash, and we have the African context. Some of the ways that backlash has been shaping out, the gender backlash, is repeal of course, of Roe v. Wade, which was a landmark judgment in the United States, and that started the downward spiral for rollback of sexual and reproductive health rights all over the world. There's a scrapping of feminist foreign policy that happened in the West, and this led to reduction in ODA flow to Africa and other global South countries. There is the anti-DEI policies that is happening in colleges and in many institutions in America, and now trickling down to other parts of the world, including Africa. And of course, in the specific African context, we have a reversal of some harmful traditional practices, like reversal of the ban on FGM, for instance. We have democratic backsliding, weak enforcement, or for instance, in Nigeria, we just see that gender proposals die in the committees. Nothing happens, no overt opposition, but they just die in the committee. And of course, we need strategic responses, which we will talk about later. I will go back and talk about okay. I'll talk about okay. Yeah. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So the architecture of backlash, of pushback, like I said, can be loud or quiet. And we can see some of them already happening quietly in Africa, okay, and more overtly in countries of the West. Starving institutions of critical funds, refuse to enforce or implement existing laws, blocking appointments, and diluting UN texts, and of course, including social shaming, systemic barriers. The more overt ones usually happen at the personal and community level, and we have seen a lot of that. I will not say much about that. Of course, we have to differentiate between the incidents, personal incidents of backlash and the systemic incidents of the backlash. The trending incidents are the random ones, the ones that happen at a personal level: violence against women, sexual assault, as harassment of politicians. These are like, random incidents, which of course could have any reason depending on the local context, and therefore we don't take this as the systemic backlash. But when this personal becomes political, those who are in gender studies know that term well. The personal is political. When this personal backlash or smaller, I would say tiny ones, go on, they eventually become systemic. That is when the backlash upgrades to the institutional level, policies, laws, and institutional cultures, begin to be affected. So we want to focus our attention mainly on the systemic policy backlash, because the trending incidents could have so many meanings, and that if we go into that, we're not going to come out of it. So let's focus our mind that when we talk about gender backlash at this forum, we're talking about the more systemic one. Now, of course, I have talked about that, and I think that it is when it starts at the local level that it moves up to the regional rollbacks. Multilateral organizations are influencing it because the backlashers, I'll call them, are infiltrating into policy spaces, and they go in batches to downvote gender legislation. They change the text of gender-sensitive phrases within the UN conventions, giving them, totally different meaning. By the time you check the meaning, they have watered down the gender focus of those legislations and covenants. And of course, by the time it becomes global triggers, it's like they are too far gone for us to start them. And we begin to experience, the slow rate of achievement of gender equality that I talked about. Now, I would just say that we need to untangle why this is happening, before we start going into specific triggers that maybe some of our panelists will talk about. We have to untangle the conceptual friction. Why? To me, I think the fundamental reason is because people are equating feminism and gender equality as the same thing. The people think that feminism is gender equality. As Professor Comey said, feminism is like a tongue-in-cheek word or concept in Africa. And when you are an economist, a social welfare advocate, by the time you call yourself a feminist, people see a lot of baggage around you, such that you are being misunderstood left, right, and center. I have experienced it in several decades of my career. Finding it difficult to tell people that no, we are not always talking about feminism. We're talking about gender equality in a structural sense. But people conflate these two. But essentially, they are complementary. We need feminism in order to unearth signs of gender equality, which we take to the policy table to be addressed through policies and programming. So although feminism is a political ideology that has other baggages when you understand the different waves of feminism in the West, but it is still an essential methodological tool that scholars, activists, practitioners need to analyze structural differences of why the same policies, have differential impacts on women and men. And feminism helps us to theorize the personal. What happens to a little girl who is raped in one corner of Kenya could be happening to another person in Lagos. But by the time we connect the dots of these small incidences into a theoretical concept that explains why it is happening, the form in which it is happening, we begin to work towards a solution. And then that solution is the outcome, the gender equality gap that we want to bridge. So the gender equality goal, is upfront. It looks at parity of gender in different aspects. It looks at inclusive growth, how inclusive our policies and laws bring in women and more people into the growth stage. And of course, within the SDGs that we know, gender equality is a central goal. It is measurable and it can deliver development that leaves no one behind. The UN Women has identified over 80 variables, targets of the SDGs that without which other goals cannot be achieved, gender equality related goals. So we see the centrality of gender equality. Even if you forget about feminism, don't we want inclusive growth? Don't we want more women in the more people in the development space? Don't we want more people to upscale their capability to contribute to growth? That is what we need to close gender gap. So feminism is not equal to gender equality, despite their complementarities, because feminism is one main reason why Africans fear gender advocates, and I know we're going to talk more about it. But feminism is the necessary diagnostic lens that gender equality needs to reach its destination. Another conflation, another cause, another trigger is the fallacy of the patriarchal lens. Those who have the patriarchal lens look at gender equality as what we're saying is that women need to rise. But what this is that when women rise, men fall, as if it's a zero-sum game. But, we have to put it out there. That's an understanding that it's not about a zero-sum game. When women rise, their households rise with them, and men as well rise with them. The whole economy is better off. And so on the right side, you see the concentric circle of the radiating influence of gender equality on whole economies. I think as advocates, all of us here, we owe it on ourselves to promote this understanding. And I hope that some of this forum will lead to this promotion of understanding so we have less backlash. Finally, I just want to say that right now, as we speak, the Commission on the Status of Women is holding in New York. And we have over 10,000 delegates, mostly women from over 150 countries, milling all over the place, having meetings, chatting. But this year, there is a fairly sober tune to the theme because of the backlash. It is set against the background of an overt backlash that is already seen by the UN Women and other agencies. And so the theme is about strengthening access to justice, because there are all these laws and policies, but they are not working because they are not being implemented because of the backlash. So like we're going to court, let's take it to the court of justice and ensure that those laws are enforceable. So in spite of laws, justice is steadily being denied and the backlash is growing. What do we do about it? We hope that the CSW, which is the 70th edition, will finally come up with something that can move the needle on gender equality. I think I'm going to stop at this point and allow our distinguished panelists under the direction of Professor Funke Mojuba Okomi. Like I said, Funke is a tough cookie, so you better beware and keep to time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah.
And happy birthday to
Thank
you and to the young man. Okay, so we have a great opportunity to interrogate, dissect, and reframe what might be happening in the gender equality struggle. Gender equality has to be seen as structural in nature. And yeah, laws are important. Going to court to fight for justice is important. But are there resources that enable people to get justice? Because there's a difference between the de jure, what the law requires, and de facto what people experience. But I'm going to leave it to our panelists to really talk about these issues and more as we try to look at the gender backlash that's going on. So some of the things that we want to look at is the extent to which there's a gender backlash. Is there one, really? In what spaces can we identify them? What evidence do we have to support gender backlash happening? Deliberate actions, coalitions working together, maybe transnationally, or narrative framings that are morphing every day, that may cast gender equality, especially in Africa, as a foreign concept. Should we all be concerned? Can we trust the data to determine whether gender backlash exists before we draw conclusions? What kind of data are we seeing, and what's that data saying? What is data not able to capture? What other underlying factors, including nuanced factors in the social, political, cultural, and economic spaces, may point to the gender balance? Now, the whole backlash term itself, is this the right word in the African context? Given that there's resistance to some gender reforms in the continent, and many people who resist this, they say that our culture is being assaulted by people who are influenced by foreign ideologies and agenda. So, I mean, how is it that we can draw continuity between what happened in the past in a way that actually relies on fact and not conjecture and politics? So, these are the things that we're going to be looking at in an interdisciplinary way, because we're all coming from different disciplinary and professional perspectives. And we expect, all of us, a rich, intellectually rigorous set of responses from our colleagues. So I would like to ask this so all those questions, they're general, right? But specifically, each of us, the panelists, as a gender scholar, why would knowledge framing be problematic in reinforcing the gender backlash? Are there scholarly theories, especially feminist ones, and tools and methodologies that are said to be good for promoting gender equality, that also center African realities in knowledge production? This is going on long, right? I hope you're following me. So how do these realities and these theories help us to address true decolonization, our minds, our consciousness, and then our agenda? So in addressing the backlash, what kind of feminist framings may need a re-examination that promotes rather than constrains valid developmental gender equality goals and programs? We want you to give evidence-based, policy-relevant answers that would foster implementation and good outcomes. So is Africa, in your opinion, implementing gender equality policies and programs in the right way? Or is Africa failing to do this appropriately? What do we need to change to position African gender scholarship as primary theories rather than responses to what's going on globally or in the West? How do we resist monolithic language framings to show that gender backlash exhibits its own structural triggers in different countries? So maybe I'll turn first to Kehinde Ajayi. Your organization recently held a conference on gender backlash in September 2025. If this was due to some concerns, what were these concerns? And when you compare the global and regional contexts, was there any evidence that pointed to the emergence of a gender backlash in Africa? What does this look like, And should we be concerned? If so, why? What key recommendations came out that could be carried forward from this first interaction that you had? And what can we also carry forward in this policy chat? So, 7 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry.
There's two kind days here, so yes, don't blame me for mistaking. Thank you so much for this question. I put the link in the chat to the event, the conference that we had last year, and I'll be putting some links as well because I think it's useful for anybody who wants to follow up to read anything. But a lot of questions there. The three things I'm going to highlight. One is that from my perspective, this gender backlash is real. And it is happening globally. Thank you so much for that overview, providing the structure on it. So it's happening globally. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm an economist, and so I kind of approach this from an economics perspective. I'm also based in Washington, D.C., so we're also very close to what's happening in the Trump administration. So I'll start there by using that to illustrate some sense of why we see this gender backlash being real. At the global perspective and how this is impacting Africa, when the Trump administration came in last year, we saw some very clear changes overall. One was a cut in overall funding for global development. And secondly, that was interacted with specific changes around gender equality. So, the restrictions on the use of the term gender in government documents and policies. And then we've seen just this year the reintroduction of the Mexico City policy. So this is restricting funding to support abortion or anything related to promoting gender ideology. So all this implies that we've seen big funding cuts, and the US was historically one of the biggest funders of things related to gender equality. Part of this comes through funding for things related to sexual reproductive health and maternal and child mortality. There's been a 70% cut in funding overall, 40% cut in funding overall, but 90% of funding for maternal and child health and sexual and reproductive health has been cut. And we've already seen impacts on women's death for women and for children. So from a funding perspective, this backlash is real. My colleagues have also documented how the impacts of funding around or policies around trade. So there was the trade shifts in the tariffs that impacted a lot of female-dominated industries like the textile industries in Lesotho, for example. So that has also had impacts on women's economic empowerment and women's well-being. And then these migration policies we've also seen have differentially impacted women because a lot of migrants are women. So overall, there's been a disproportionate impact of these policies on women. Beyond this, at the global level, and there are other countries that have also shifted, as you mentioned, that their funding shifted from a feminist foreign policy, which really prioritized funding women's rights groups, funding different interventions to support women and girls. So they have shifted the funding for this. So it's not just the US. We see disproportional cuts towards funding supporting women. And so on one hand, there's this financing piece. And on the other hand, there's the second point I'm going to make is this from the legal side. And I know there's some lawyers among us who can talk more to this, but we're seeing real attacks on the legal side on things like the attempt to repeal the laws against female genital mutilation in the Gambia, laws on access to abortion in Sierra Leone, laws on things like sexual oriented LGBTQI rights in Kenya, Uganda, and then laws around child marriage and attempts to repeal those. So there are a lot of legal aspects in which we're seeing all this backlash. On the positive side, though, I mean, a lot of these attempts have not been successful. So I think while we talk about backlash, the broader point, again, that was illustrated before, is this is coming because of progress. And, backlash, when you think about the triggers, I think one of the big triggers we have to acknowledge is there has been a lot of progress. For example, Namibia has, its first female president. Rwanda for a long time has been leading in these indicators, global indicators of women's economic equality or gender equality. So there are examples of progress. And the broader point I'll end with is that what I see as a fundamental reason for this backlash is because it's not about gender equality for gender equality's sake, but the patriarchy upholds extractive capitalism. And what we know from the past is that societies, and even examples that we see today, societies that promote gender equality also support investing in community well-being. So investing in things like health, education, social services, and also promote environmental well-being. So, limit the extraction of or exploitation of natural resources. So I think it's important to recognize this is not just a question about oppressing women, but it's a question about upholding the global extractive system of capitalism, which relies on extracting natural resources from Africa. It relies on extracting labor from people who are not paid and compensated and enriching the small number of people at the top. So I think that it's important to see this as an economic issue and not just and the oppression of women and girls is key to upholding that system. And in terms of what can we see that's different is the recognition, as I mentioned earlier, as I alluded to earlier, that African societies, not all of them, but many, indigenous systems really were progressive. And we see this in things like language, whether there's he or the non-gendered pronouns that are already built into a lot of languages. We think about religion, God not being male, having female gods if there are multiple gods, and God not being a man if there is just one overall God. Lots of examples of women's representation in business and commerce. We see this currently in the high female labor force participation in Africa compared to other regions in the global South. And so what I see as key for making progress is emphasizing that this is African. Gender equality is an African value. It is something that we see encoded into a lot of African societies, and taking that as a way forward to reinforce that this is reclaiming our legacy and not a foreign imposition. And that is economic thing at stake, and the exploitation of African economies is really what's at stake. I'll end there.
Thank you so much. There's a lot in there, but patriarchy upholds extractive capitalism, and African indigenous societies are progressive. And, they have values that assert this progressive understandings of gender. But many Africans deny this. We won't go into that now. It seems like maybe there's need for serious education about what is African in a historically accurate way. So thank you so much. Adamnesh Bogale, your organization, ASET, has produced evidence and metrics from a number of gender equality projects that assess achievement of gender equality and how this can promote Africa's economic transformation. And also, they place African gender power dynamics as a central concept specifically within the depth framework. We would like an explanation of the depth framework because we are not all insiders to ASET. What findings from this work of yours might reveal a slowing down of progress in gender equality? Do we have evidence of a backlash that could be detrimental to economic transformation and vice versa? What areas of mainstream economic transformation policies could constrain gender equality? What data do you have? What is it saying or not saying about this backlash that we want to interrogate today?
Thank you, Madam Okome. Just let me take a few seconds to also add on what Kehinde and Bola have said on the gender backlash and whether it exists first. So my own position is, yes, there is a gender backlash, but I also think we have to be very careful in defining it, because if we define it narrowly, we may miss what is actually happening. So I want to add a layer to that. I do not think backlash is only about hostility to equality itself. I think backlash is often where power, identity, institutional weakness, insecurity in terms of the economy. And it matters because if we misunderstand the backlash, we will respond to it in the wrong way. So for me, there are at least some spaces that we need to identify. One of the spaces is law and policy, which we at ASSET have tried to look at: budgets and institutions, public narrative space, social values and norms, and economic governance itself. So now coming back to assets. So at ASSET, we approach this issue through the lens of economic transformation mainly. So as you mentioned, one of the frameworks we use is the depth framework, which means simply the depth. The D stands for diversification, E for export competitiveness, P for productivity, technology upgrading, and human well-being. So all this, it would mean that the idea is that growth alone is not enough. What matters is whether economies are becoming more productive, more technologically capable, and more inclusive. So that's what it means when we dissect the depth. We say that we need diversified economies, more competitive exports, higher productivity, stronger technological adoption, and better human well-being. So that is what's all about depth. So from the data that ASSET has, from its standpoint, the story is not that gender progress has stopped everywhere. The story is that progress is uneven, it's shallow in some places, it has stalled in some places, and most often disconnected from structural transformation that we want to uphold. So I say that is where backlash becomes possible and also costly. From the gender perspective, the key question that we want to ask is who is participating in this transformation and who is being left behind. So assets, one of the flagship products, the African Women Inclusion Index, which I will put in the chat in a bit, examines that women's inclusion across 4 dimensions: law, leadership, financial inclusion, and economic participation. What we find is not the absence of progress, as I said, rather what we see is uneven and incomplete progress. In some countries, we see some progress. In others, we see stalling. In some of them, we see reversal. So women are entering education, entrepreneurship spaces in large numbers, but we see that they remain heavily concentrated in informal and low productivity sectors. This is an important aspect of a backlash. Legal frameworks may improve, but financial systems, labor markets, and asset ownership patterns continue to disadvantage women. This is where we see the political economy dimension becoming very important. Gender equality, I believe does not automatically emerge from economic growth. Meaning economic growth may not directly translate into gender equality, right? Economic transformation policies can actually reinforce gender equality if they're not designed with inclusion in mind. They may be actually contributing to the inequality. We need a very, very careful, strategized policies. For example, industrial policy may prioritize sectors where women are underrepresented. Financial systems may rely on collateral and credit histories that women disproportionately lack. But we can call this growth, which is not helping in the gender equality arena. Technology policy may overlook gender gaps because how many women can afford those digital equipment, digital access? How many women have the skills, right? So even if we see these things, these infrastructures, even if we invest in these infrastructures, they may not be actually helping in the gender equality. And infrastructure investment may focus on roads and energy while neglecting care infrastructure, which is very, very important because the care is what drives labor market. Childcare, water systems, which are essential for women's economic participation. So from our perspective, the risk is not only explicit backlash against gender equality. The risk is something subtler and kind of hidden. Economic transformation that includes women rhetorically, the tokenism that we see everywhere, but it excludes them structurally. Women are mentioned in number. We see the number of women who are now generating income, the number of girls who are now enrolled in education, and then what happens? Are we seeing progress? We see the progress being shallow, even with these statements of inclusion, even with these efforts of inclusion. Expectations rise, but institutions and economic structures do not change enough to support these expectations. That gap can create frustration and make reforms very vulnerable to backlash narratives because we're not moving equally with the infrastructure that we have, with what we have at hand to actually implement what we're saying by law. So to your question, what is the data saying and what it's not saying is that progress exists. That's what the data is saying, but it's uneven. It's not transformative enough. Legal or symbolic gains are not automatically becoming inclusion. We're not including women, even though we are having tons of statements in the laws, tons of statements in the policies, unless we have the implementation tools in terms of finance, in terms of political commitment, in terms and will, and in terms of budget, funding, not defunding, we're not going anywhere. Weak implementation and weak supportive frameworks, these are major problems everywhere. Social norms continue to constrain economic and political participation. These are what the data are saying. What the data is not saying is that how budget cuts are affecting gender gains. Where's the money going? We talk about gender responsive budgeting everywhere. Many countries have that. But it doesn't go beyond the tagging. Where is the money going, actually? How budget cuts are affecting these? How are the care burdens blocking transformation? Nobody's talking about that. We have so much information. We have so much background papers and in knowledge on the care burden. But how do we translate that care into something productive? We don't have data on that. How power operates and how backlash works through these discords, we don't have the data on that. So the danger is not only that gender equality is being opposed, the danger is that economic transformation may proceed in ways that can absorb women numerically in numbers, but exclude them structurally. That's what we have at Asset. That's what we have found at Asset. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciation for your intervention. These are very important. So we're making progress. It's not adequate. Implementation is a serious challenge. We need to follow the money. We also need to pay attention to the care economy and how women's labor is fostering the well-being of the system without women being rewarded, and then understanding the nature of power and its intricacies in enabling access and denying access, even when you have high GDP, and some metrics that's showing that positive things are happening. We need to drill down and see gendered effects and then have appropriate remedies. Thank you. Ore Fawole. 7 minutes. So in 7 minutes, we'd like you to answer these questions that could be the subject of a whole book, like every other panelist, because you all are brilliant people. Is there any evidence of youth resistance to gender equality programming and outcomes? On the other hand, do you perceive a toning down of gender equality in the narratives that we have? For instance, technological innovation has been floated as this transformational innovation that would transform our lives. I'm still waiting for AI to be making my lunch. So, for instance, would affirmative action for girls still be critical in closing gender gaps in youth-occupied spaces, such as fintech? What kind of youth-led strategies are working across gender boundaries that may present an alternative to gender-based affirmative action? How may platforms like TikTok, X, WhatsApp, and so forth accelerate the spread of liberatory gender discourse among African youth? What kind of counter movements are emerging in these same spaces, especially those related to gender relations and gender agency? Then is there a distinctly African technosphere? And are there African narratives within these spaces? How does this compare to or diverge from global north equivalents? We are all eager to hear from you, Ore.
All
In
right, thank
7
you.
minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, the submissions by my fellow panelists have been very insightful on my own end, but because my work sits at the intersection of youth employment, technology, and future of work, I'm going to approach this from a youth digital culture and the economic realities for youths. So, for your first question about resistance to gender policies, I would say yes, there is some resistance, and I would say this is because of the framing, basically, of gender issues. It's mostly has been framed or traditionally has been framed as a competition rather than collaboration, opportunity for collaboration. So, but among the youths, I've not noticed because I have interacted with a lot of youth and I'm involved with a lot of civil society movements with youth involved. I've not noticed gatherings solely on gender ideology. Yes, there's the feminist movement, there's the women in tech movement, but even in those gatherings, in those coalitions, we find a balance. There's men involved in those movements to amplify these gaps in various sectors. So for the youths, I would say it's more of a competition based in because of the lack of opportunities. So if we say there's a backlash, it's the backlash is real, yes. But what drives the backlash? What's making this backlash amplified because there's already the awareness of female underrepresentation in various sectors, and there's already movements around that. And I would say what appears as gender backlash is mainly economic frustration from my observation, where there are scarce opportunities. There's high unemployment in Africa. We have the youngest population. Over 65% of the African population is below the age of 35. So that's a massive demographic. So, and this puts a strain on opportunity, employment, infrastructure, and a whole lot of other things. So when opportunities are scarce, these gender conversations become framed as competition rather than collaboration, which can create tension. So like I said earlier, what may appear as backlash may be partly economic frustration. So we need to look at the root cause of the backlash that is causing the resistance. And that leads to your question about toning down. Yes. So speaking of toning down, when these narratives are being amplified, many people come up with the issue of, okay, what of guys? What of boys? There's also the gap for boys. So we find ourselves with a dual burden. So when I talk about this issue, it's very sensitive for me. I say, if we want to reduce the backlash among youths, we need to design systems that expand opportunity for both genders. Where there's a gap, we should design systems for females. We should design systems around that. And when that gap has been filled, we should also track data and design systems around equality, not one gender against the other. So it doesn't become a competition among genders. So that's where the resistance and toning down comes from. And to your question about affirmative action, I haven't done research into that, but earlier in the week when I was invited to this panel, I had to do a survey among my community members on this issue. And to my amazement, a lot of youths agree that yes, there should be affirmative action for female gender representation, but still agree that, sorry?
Okay.
Okay, so and still agree that access to opportunities, education, and economic and professional education should still be merit-based. So yes, like there's this movement that we need gender balance with regards to females being represented in certain sectors, but when we overcompensate, that's what leads to the backlash. When we overcompensate, we want females to be represented and now overcompensate for these traditional gaps or these traditional errors. We tend to overcompensate and now create this backlash. So speaking to technology and youth-led strategies, I mean Twitter, like X known as Twitter, WhatsApp, YouTube. The youth population is digital in nature and mobile first, and these platforms spread narratives and also misinformation. So on one hand, they're amplifying the gender narrative, and also there's also counter movements against this movement on this platform. So it still boils down to how systems are designed, how technologies are designed. For example, when designing Master Skills, my own digital platform, because it relates to access to opportunities, I made it gender neutral. It says because if a woman is capable, she should have access to the same opportunities a guy can have access to. But even with doing that, I realized the data is pointing to not just representation of women, making sure women are capable. That's when it comes to skills development and leadership opportunities. The skills acceleration among the female gender to make them able to, when they get access to these opportunities, to be able to actually utilize these opportunities and advance I won't say, I don't want to use the word narrative, but the movement for gender equality. So, and Lastly, I would just say it's not about female versus male. It's about equality. Like, if we focus on just the female gender, we will meet ourselves in these same situations. It will be like a helix where we just keep going around in circles, where the male feel that they're not being represented, that the females also feel they're not being represented, and it will lead us nowhere. So the challenge ahead for us is just ensuring that digital spaces or youth spaces promote collaboration rather than deepen these gender divisions.
Yes, thank you so much. So the youths agree that there should be gender balance, but their fears about overrepresentation. Guess what? This is what the elders also sometimes express. That, okay, yes, it's necessary, but now the women are taking over. And it's about resources and where we put these resources. And then lack of opportunity in the youngest continent in the world is a serious issue. Many of our young people are underemployed. They have skills, they have, enthusiasm, they have education, and they're not able to have access to opportunities in ways that encourage them that they are relevant. So we're going to come back to all these. So it's economic, it's structural, it's also about what kinds of priorities we have, and it's about power. We've heard so far. So, it's structural. So we're going to move on and ask Rafsanjani. Raf, this question is for you, and I'm going to encourage you to be very brief. 7 minutes. As a strong voice on political activism and good governance in Nigeria, do you think the political participation of women is being negatively affected by a deliberate gender backlash? What data or evidence speaks to your conclusions? In Nigeria, does this extend to other African countries? What are the strengths and weaknesses of institutional, legal, and constitutional policies? They are also called ILC, in our alphabet soup-driven world, that may have paved the way for any patterns of low representation that you see. Is this why we have the gender backlash? To what extent does gender backlash function as a proxy war for broader political fights over sovereignty, nationalism, resource scarcity, and foreign influence? Okay, so how do economic crises, in your estimation, and land dispossession, and also the legacies we have from structural adjustment? I don't even believe they're legacies. It's ongoing experiences of structural adjustment. How do they fuel masculine identity anxieties that then translate into gender violence and rollback? 7 minutes. You can write a book, but we want your 7-minute version.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. Of course, there's no doubt that just like in many other countries in Africa, Nigerian situation, is not different, from so many countries that have been affected by this unfortunate development that we find, in many countries. Political participation of women in Nigeria is being severely and negatively affected by deliberate, and the multifaceted gender backlash. This is very clear and this is very obvious. You can see it, happening. It is not just merely a case of slow progress. It is simply an active pushback against women's inclusion, which is manifested through institutional resistance, political violence, and weaponization of even procedure. This is what we are seeing in Nigeria. And of course, the evidence is overwhelming. You see the institutional and party level exclusion. Today, political parties are not really institutionalizing women participation or opportunity for them to contest, only to use them as just crowd, mobilizers. That is why you will hardly see them holding any political offices outside the women leader in political parties because of this, institutional exclusion. In fact, the worry we have now is that in 2027 election, you may not see more women even in the legislature at the state and the national level because there's no deliberate and conscious effort of political parties to mainstream women in getting into elected position. The current administration, we even thought that they will even do better than the previous one, but this is not what we are seeing. You also see the legislative, backslide in terms of prioritizing, or giving attention to, legal frameworks that will ensure more inclusion of women.
So I'm going to ask questions, all right? And any question I ask, I'm going to lift up the phone card.
Excuse me, mute yourself, please.
Okay, I was wondering whether it is this question.
No, it's not for you.
Yes, yeah. So you can see that some of the progressive, provision that we, thought the National Assembly will agree to allow to ensure more inclusion of women, in political and elective position. They have deliberately and consciously undermined that, and that's really terrible. You also see, even for the few ones that are there, there appears to be, silencing and punishment. If you try to raise, issue or try to bring any thing that will, counter this, narrative, you will see that they will go after you and nothing is going to happen. So you would see that women continue to suffer exclusion, both politically, economically. Many women have no access to credits. Many women are not even being, supported to or encouraged to go to school because of so many, sexual, harassment that you see that follows. Only recently, CISLAC and ICPC worked to ensure that a professor who was involved in, sexual extortion, was actually exposed and punished. We need more of such kind of bosses because a lot of women have suffered either at the workplace or at the school from such kind of thing. But the worst part of it is that even the pure, women in elective and appointed positions, they appears to be silenced, not even raise issues around the gender justice. They are consumed by those men, in the various places, and they have not been able to build alliances, with the outside places where they find themselves. So will be difficult for them alone to champion this without, building alliances with other, people that are like minds. Again, of course, my colleagues has mentioned some of the backslide that we also have in the years, which also directly affected how people think in Africa and in Nigeria, because the Trump administration appears to decision or to abandon the conscious effort of women mainstreaming in the United States. So that has a trickle effect, in Nigeria, where before any meeting, you will make sure that people are conscious about gender in the table. In whatever we are doing, there was that a little bit consciousness that you have to bring in, women. Now, because of what Trump has done, people are comfortable openly, ignoring that, and I think for me is a serious backlash also, So again, you will also see that some of the religious, leaders that before they used to really, give concession, now they are also tightening up. So back and front, left and right, we are experiencing these challenges, and I think we need to rise up to ensure that we demand gender justice. Like I said before, Professor Bolaji, we have done some work around gender budgeting in Nigeria, which really got attraction, and so many state assemblies were beginning to do or to consider gender budgeting. Today, the voices of gender budgeting had
Okay.
collapsed. The UNICEF that was supposed to be supporting, they appears to also go to sleep. So many international organizations who supposed to be helping on women cause, they appears to be either overwhelmed or they are losing, interest in what is going on in Nigeria because of the democratic backsliding, which also directly affect, gender backsliding in Nigeria. So, but we are not losing hope. We will continue to push and advocate and ensure mainstreaming of women in socio-economic and political development in Nigeria,
All
particularly
right.
ensuring that.
Ralph,
Okay.
wrap up.
Okay, Prof. I just want to say that let's keep the spirit and let's continue to, insist that, it is a justice cause. It is not just a mere declaration.
All right. Thank you so much. The great Rafsanjani.
Prof.
So, like the Yoruba say, the big masquerade is the one that comes last. So, Professor Jacob Olukbono, social norms are so powerful in any development space, and gender norms are of this nature in our experience in Africa. Norms have been used to silently or overtly promote or constrain gender equality. How might these norms also apply in the case of the gender backlash? How do religious actors, the Pentecostalists, the Islamic community, and the traditionalists, and I dare say some mainstream Christians also, how do these religious actors mobilize authentic cultural identity claims to resist gender equality agendas? And how should scholars engage this without reproducing colonial secularism? Where do customary law, statutory law, and constitutional gender protections conflict? And who arbitrates these conflicts? What other cultural factors are responsible, especially from a historical, contemporary, epistemic perspective? Which of these issues must be put on the front burner for the discourse of this backlash? That is, how do we solve these problems today? Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Professor Okome, for this question. I'm pretty emotional this morning hearing from Kehinde Ajayi, who was born in Boston when we were all here together. My wife was actually involved in, taking care of her when we were here in 14 Boswell. So thank you very much. And seeing colleagues over here. I sent a note, a brief response to the call for discussion to Professor Akanji, and she's free to, to share it with you. It's very interesting to listen to quite a lot of youth of us here who are into policy. I'm a humanist, and but in our own way, and this is my 50th year of teaching, we try as much as possible to respond to these issues of gender backlash. And these personal stories are very important because it also involves that in teaching and research and in encountering the graduate students we are training, we make sure that certain rules are, obeyed. And one of these, of course, is to ensure that in your training and the responses to us through your papers and dissertation, you do absolute justice to these whole questions and queries that we're discussing here. And I think this pedagogy matter is important for all of us, whether you are into gender or you are into policy or you are simply just a humanist doing ethnographic research or archival research. It's as I look at the issues and the questions, and I reflect on Nigeria, my own country, and realizing that the only time Muslims and Christians come together in the Senate or the House is when they want to defeat a bill that has to do with making life better for women. That's the only time they come together to vote in bloc to say no to it. So, which confirms, of course, our thesis that there is gender backlash, and somewhere we have not found a way to, a response to it. I am one of the few people, I think, Nigerians who just do not like this idea of identifying or giving titles to wives of governors and presidents because it doesn't really work well. We don't, First Lady phenomena, which they then translated to the church and the mosque. So in the Anglican church now, my own church, we do have first lady. And of course, those of you who are Nigerians who know the origin of that word at that time. So religion is very central to this crisis and to this problem. And to be able to understand it, of course, we have to look at it both in the context of cosmology, the worldview that, supports the religious ideologies, and how this has become so entrenched in the culture and the society that we are, relating to and dealing with. And we have to make sure that as scholars and teachers in colleges and universities, that we find a way of ensuring that these issues are indirectly addressed in our work. If you are my student at Harvard or even at UC Davis before, you know that if you do a paper for me and you do not show to me the gender implications of that, is most likely I will ask you to go and write the paper.
So, Prof, we have to come to Harvard.
Well, I'm rounding up now. It's time to
Yes.
go. It's time to leave now. So the first thing is that we as scholars must take this thing very seriously. The second thing relates to what Professor Kume said earlier on in your opening remark, and that is the questions of methodology and theory. What kinds of ideas and methodology, how do we do our work in a way that we will not continue to reproduce those ideas and theories that have been handed over to us? So as a response to that, a few years ago, I developed what I call indigenous semiotics, which by that when we are dealing with an issue like this, whether it's gender, sexuality, or whatever it is, we must begin from the subject matter itself. We must agree that these materials we are dealing with have within them ingredients that will enable us reflect on the problems we are dealing with. I say to my graduate students, I'm not going to ask you not to cite Foucault, but once you get tenure, you may decide to throw the thing away if it's not relevant. But you must begin to look at your own thing itself. And part of it is that when you are now teaching in a place like this, and African students do not even cite African scholars who are working on various subjects that relate to their work, then that is a problem that we need to deal with. We kind of pretend as if these things are not important.
Prof, thank you, sir.
The other thing is that, and now let me come to the questions of religion.
Prof, we want you to wrap up in 1 minute so that the audience can ask questions.
Okay, I will wrap up. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, sir.
The questions of religion is that there are cases when gender issues are invoked by people who we trust, but we do not really know that they are actually counterproductive to that. And the example I want to share is the case study in Kwara State, when an Anglican bishop decided to ordain women, which is against the tradition. But most people did not know that he was fighting a larger cause, was fighting the church. It has nothing to do with women or even gender equality. So thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Prof. And I'm so sorry. Like I said, the questions being asked are enough for multi-100-page books. Prof, we're so blessed to benefit from your knowledge. And we hope that you will let us all come to Harvard, Abby, to come and learn some of these things.
Go
Epistemology.
and ask Trump that question.
Epistemology is important. What constitutes knowledge? And how do we know that it is knowledge? Whose voice do we privilege when we are thinking about this? What kind of methodologies do we use in doing our work? And then, you talk also about the centrality of religion and the politics of the production of knowledge. The absurdity of African scholars who do not cite Africans because they see Foucault and Marx and all Adam Smith as the powerhouses. Even when people talk about popular relations, they would talk about the Kardashians and not what is going on in Nigeria or in Ethiopia, Ghana, and other African countries. So we need to do better to have more consciousness. A lot of this is about being decolonized in our mind and letting this influence our education. So now we have used up a lot of time. I think maybe audience questions should be entertained. And there are quite a few from Dr. Olarinde Olomola. I think what we could do, because she asks a lot, and one of our panelists, the young techie person, Ore, has answered her question. Dr. Olarinde, pick one of those questions that you love the most and ask it of our panelists so that we can have audience participation. And then I would like also for panelists to see if they have questions, brief and pithy, for other panelists and for Professor Akonji. Don't ask me anything. I don't know anything. So let's go. Dr. Olomola, where are you? Or shall I just read your question?
Yes, I think you should do that, moderator.
Okay,
Yes, please, if you can read it.
Okay, I would like you to actually do it. Do you want me to read the Professor Akonji one? All right. So the first comment and question from Omolola Olarinde Olomola, who is a professor at Afe Babalola. No, is that where you are? Anyway, she's a professor in Nigeria. She's an economist.
I'm at Eliza Day. Maybe I
Eliza
should
Day,
just,
your mom is at
that's
Afe
fine.
Babalola. Okay.
Exactly, exactly.
You see why
Maybe
you
I
should have
should
spoken.
just, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Because the most pertinent one to me is the one that relates to Dr. Adamesh.
Okay.
And I just wanted to ask her, okay, there's a bit of progress on women participation in the workforce. But then the dual burden remains in terms of unpaid household care. And I wanted her to comment a bit from her work on what would progress look like for women in terms of, balancing these two, socially constructed roles, particularly in the context that the household care burdens have not reduced. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So, yes, can we have an answer? And then any panelist that also has a brief intervention can contribute after the main recipient of this question responds.
Okay.
Moderator, please, can we collect all the questions?
Well, majority of the questions are from Dr. Olarinde.
There are a few.
Now, there's another question, and I will just quickly read that. It's, give me one moment. It's from, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce the name, Kome Ndemezo,
Yeah.
who is from Rwanda. According to this questioner, our country, that is Rwanda, has made remarkable progress in advancing gender equality. Over 60% of parliamentarians are women, and equality is enshrined in our constitution. Yet the reality behind these achievements is more complex. A woman who leads in the office is still expected to return home and cook, fetch water, and care for children. The burden of unpaid care has not shifted. Men's roles in the household have not evolved to match women's expanded roles in public life. As a result, many women carry a double shift, leadership responsibilities during the day and invisible domestic work at night. When women rise, communities often celebrate them publicly, but question them privately, calling them too ambitious or suggesting they neglect their families. These quiet reactions are forms of backlash that discourage women from continuing to lead. So it's not a question, but a comment. And it is real. Actually, in the US also, research shows that career women, they do more housework than stay-at-home moms. So go figure. Um, let's hear from,
There's another question from TA.
okay,
In finance, I think it's important.
I want to go back. Okay,
TA.
I think just a minute. It's not from TA. Is it from T? Okay, so Professor Akonji is making an extremely insightful presentation. I have this
That's from Dr. Olarinde. It's further down.
is further down. Okay, in finance, we are seeing some quiet shifts in diversity initiatives. For example, Goldman Sachs is removing gender criteria from broad investment considerations. And at my own firm, Girls in STEM recruitment program is being, you have to forgive me because this is
Could
not
I
easy.
read out the question myself? It's okay.
Yes,
I don't
yes,
mind.
could you please do that? I can't.
Hello. Yeah, okay, no problem. Hello, everyone. I'm Tomi Adu. In finance, so I work in finance, and I find this discourse be extremely relevant, in my industry as well. And I was just referring to some recent developments. So, big firm Goldman Sachs They were very loud in post George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, responses about putting all these criteria in place, not just for minorities, but for women as well. They've now, it was all over the news maybe about a month or 6 weeks ago that they've now removed the gender criteria from their investment considerations. So before, they wouldn't put capital or money towards any firm that didn't have a woman on their board of directors. They've now quietly removed that. They tried it quietly, but obviously the press got a hold of it. We're seeing similar happening, across other banks and other firms. Closer to home, there was a Girls in STEM recruitment initiative that I was very involved with for a number of years. When I went in this year to moderate that recruitment program, which is for 16 to 18-year-olds, I went in there and I noticed that there were boys in that.
Okay,
and I
please
was
wrap up quickly. Yeah.
Sorry. So my question is, how much of this current backlash is actually a discomfort with the fact that systems used to reward mediocrity? And so now merit has a higher threshold. I want to hear from any of the panelists in terms of what's actually driving that, if they think it's just because, unfortunately, some of these men have to work harder than they did before to get the same spots that they did in the past.
Okay, thank you so much. And then there's another question. We have a raised hand. I see you, Dr. Adelabu. There's another question from Wumi Ashubiaro Dada. Do you want to ask your question, please? And make it succinct. Wumi. Dr. Ashubiaro Dada. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think Dr. Kendi saw the question and is trying to answer that. I'm just arguing that the backsliding that is being experienced in the US is projected on the global South, as though we haven't been experiencing both backsliding and backlash, but more of backlash in Nigeria. And the greatest example of that I can think of is the rejection of the 5 gender bills by National Assembly, which we still don't have. And even right now, the demands that we're making for special seats. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. So we have the finance question. We have the general question. I think we'll hear from Dr. Let's see, from Folashade Abolarin. Do you want to talk or should I just read this? Not hearing from you, I'm going to just read it. I hope I'll not digress from the topic with this silly analysis. The Bible story at creation creates this issue of gender relegation. God realized that women are smarter than their male counterparts. Hence, he made sure that he made her subject to Adam. Eve was more inquisitive, analytical, and futuristic. And because Eve succumbed to this initial oppression, women could no longer soar. So how do we equalize, or will this go on till eternity? Then we have Dr. Nike Oduwole to Professor Okome. What are data that you mentioned not able to capture in this backlash? Oh, okay. I think you, Kehinde Ajayi, well, let's see. Let me
just jump on to say I unfortunately have to drop off now, but I will be in touch to follow up if there are any questions.
Okay. Do you have anything to say to any of the questions that were asked before you drop off?
I replied in the chat. I think I tried to reply to the ones in the chat,
right.
but please feel free to send any by email and I will follow up. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, can you just give
thank you.
1 or 2 roundup statements, if we can indulge? Yeah, fine.
I would say that I'll just pick up briefly on the point about men and this being part of the backlash, being the sense that women are being prioritized, and this sense of scarcity that gender equality means if women are rising, that men are being pushed beside. And I think it's really important to recognize that the movement for gender equality, I think, has really neglected to bring in the collective. But it is important to emphasize that we see that things that are valuable for women are often beneficial to men and society as a whole too. When we talk about care, unpaid care, for example. That's one example where we've seen studies that providing care not just improves women's ability to engage in the economy, but also improves men's ability to engage in the economy. And it also creates jobs for men too, investing in formalizing the care economy, so increasing the formalization of jobs, providing for childcare, elder care, care for people with long-term health issues, creates employment, addresses this employment challenge. I'll put in the chat some work I've done on that, but I do think it's important to recognize that both men and women are disadvantaged by this extractive patriarchy that I talked about earlier. It is, we see this in the impacts of oil extraction on the communities. It's not just women in these communities that are affected, it's men and women. Climate change is affecting men and women. Poor exploitative labor, so low-cost labor impacts men and women. So I think we really do have to reframe the conversation to emphasize that gender equality, supporting the well-being of the most vulnerable people in a society is beneficial for everybody, and shifting from this extractive patriarchy where it's a small number of men, powerful men who are enriching themselves. And it's also powerful women sometimes who benefit from the patriarchy, but shifting from a system where a small number are benefiting to one where we think about the collective. Again, a lot of going back to indigenous societies, a lot of African societies have this sense of Ubuntu or Boto, as some people call it, this sense that we are, the collectivism. And I think shifting from this individualistic, extractive patriarchy to a system of collectivism and support, mutual support, is really crucial for the benefit of both men and women and all people. So I will end there. I could go on, like you're saying, a book, and I think hopefully I'm looking forward to more conversations in this fireside chat. But thank you very much.
I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, sharing your ideas, sharing your time generously. And I would propose that each panelist is individually featured in future firesides so that we can benefit extensively from their insights. Thank you. So we'll see you later. Dr. Adelabu, 2-3 sentence question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Okome, and thank you all the panelists for an enriching session. So my question is particularly for on women representation in politics in Nigeria. So while other countries around the world are making progress, and someone has noted the case of Uganda and even Ethiopia and some countries around the world, this is even African countries I've mentioned. For women in Nigeria, politics is still a very, very hostile environment, and women representation in politics in Nigeria remains still very, very low at 4% particularly for representative politics in Nigeria. I would appreciate if one of the panelists would be able to share their thoughts on why women have been finding it very difficult to navigate the political terrain in Nigeria, and why it's still becoming very hostile, as Professor noted earlier on, that he cited an example of the only time where men come together is when they want to make a bill to frustrate women, right on women bills and so on. And so we don't see the
3
situation becoming
sentences.
better.
I think I'm
Thank
seeing
you. So
30.
yeah, so I want to hear some thoughts about that and what's the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then from my brilliant master's student, Chinedu Ezefe, to what extent do Western development agendas, such as the promotion of gender equality, shape public discourse in Africa in ways that distract from the challenge of neo-colonial extraction, economic dependency, and poverty? That is the root of the major issues. That is the root of the major issues falsely placed on gender. And I think there are a couple other questions. Did we, from Ayodeji Oluleye, did the overwhelming focus on equality, instead of addressing inequity, not trigger the backlash? So panelists, please, answer these questions. And I think we should have, we should go in the order in which people presented. Thank you.
I think I have a question was forwarded to me directly. Should I answer to that?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So, yeah, it's a very important question. The double burden. Now women have two jobs, one paid and one unpaid. So what progress would mean is in three shifts. One is recognition, then redistribution, and structural support for the care economy. What does it all mean realistically? How do societies recognize care, for example? The care challenge, I believe, cannot be solved by just one actor alone. It can't be the government alone. It can't be the market alone. It can't be households or families alone. All these three, government, at the three levels, government, market, and households need to work together for me. Government have a role in creating the enabling infrastructure. We're working on care at Asset, trying to convince governments that care investment really pays off and it reduces the care burden. Investments in care are actually productivity investments. The other is private sector and workplaces. They also have a role. Policies such as parental leave, flexible work arrangement, workplace child care, these have shown with evidence, these have shown progress for women in lessening their, in reducing their burden, at the same time in letting them be at least a bit out of their time poverty. And there's also this huge issue of norm change with households that can happen through parental leaves, through awareness creation. So realistically, the solution is not a single reform. It is a combination of infrastructure, workplace policy, and social change. So for me, progress looks like a society where women's economic participation does not have to be at the cost, does not have to come at the cost of exhaustion, where care work should be recognized. But I also want to say a couple of things on the men-women competition.
Let's also give the other
if I-
people a chance.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. Like I said, we have so much rich intervention. And I want to say to our participants, we're going to go on to 11:30. So because we want to accommodate these questions and give a chance. So we'll come back to you to give us more insight. But let's just have other panelists like Kehinde Ajayi. Would you like to say something in response to some of these questions?
They left. Kehinde left.
Oh, Kehinde left. Okay, Ore, you answered in the chat, but do you have something more to add?
You
Yes,
can
I do.
start
And I
your
also
answer.
have to jump off
Oh, okay.
because I
Yeah.
have another.
So please, quickly.
Okay, so to the question on how soft skills abilities for women are, would be assessed, and to bridge this gap. Like I answered in the chat, leadership abilities for me, it can only be assessed through observability. And one of the ideas we at our Master Skills are exploring as to skill assessment is task-based simulation. So we simulate an environment where you are put in that role and given deliverables, and there are metrics to assess your decision-making capabilities, team management capabilities, communication capabilities, and obviously this is it's not biased because the system doesn't recognize the way system is designed, doesn't recognize whether you're a man or a woman. It just gives a task to an individual. So, and you're scored without bias for gender. And in that way, talented women and men can demonstrate their abilities, and there'll be equal access to opportunities. So both leadership and other roles. And yeah, so but in general, because I have to go, I would just like to add that for Africa, I see the root cause of the youth perspective, the root cause of the gender imbalance is from opportunity scarcity, because there hasn't been lots of investment in education and job creation for the youth, and we have a booming youth population. So if we could address these realities, I think it would also, address the gender issues at large. So yeah, that's my final take. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. But, there's more that we could argue about in there because, I think the invisible element when we are saying that, it doesn't matter whether you are a man or woman when tasks are being done, is that they are strong, preconceived, and subliminal influences that seep into those workspaces that still end up reinforcing some of the structural constraints that people experience, which is why the argument about equity is very important. But don't let me go on. Let's give space to panelists to please respond to some of these audience questions. Professor Olukbono, and then Rafsanjani, please get ready.
Okay, thank you. Let me respond to the reference to the story of Adam and Eve. I think it came up much earlier on. And it simply just say that these are texts, religious texts can be interpreted by theologians in any way they like, whether it's the Quran or the Bible or Ifa divination text. It's an open text. So we then encourage scholars, particularly those who are doing gender studies, to take this thing very seriously and give meaning, to texts in ways that support their objectives of their own ideas and theses. That's what I'd like to add to this. So I'm sorry I have to leave. I have another meeting at 11.
All right.
Yes, thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Prof.
Yes,
Thank you very much, sir.
We really appreciate your spending the time with us.
Thank you.
And hope you'll come back for an individualized fireside chat with Professor Akonji.
Well, I won't say no to her. I've promised her. So I'll do
Very
it.
good.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Rafsanjani.
Yes. Thank you, Prof. So let me also join Prof to say that I think sometimes there's this deliberate mispresentation or misinterpretation of religious texts. For example, we all know that in Islam, every duty or responsibility of worship, there's no discrimination. You are equal to your fellow female or your fellow male. So therefore, you cannot simply, be twisting the text just to suit you. And I think the only way to, put this in straightforward is for us to be able to have more female that are educated, so that they can be exposing this manipulation and these lies. Secondly, I think we need to develop better strategy in approaching this, women, justice and equality in, our struggle. I think some, female, the way Amana and Wood, sadly, they also carry some of this in thinking that, completely every man is an evil and he must be seen in that direction also creates problem. There are some men that are very, very, very not only gender friendly, but they are very gender supportive. And I can say that throughout, for example, I give myself as an example, the first organization I belonged to was a women organization, Women in Nigeria. And ever since then, I have been championing that because this is what I was brought up, and I believe I'm very convinced with that. So let us not condemn everybody, who is a man to be seeing him as an anti-woman. That's not correct. There are so many men, the way they push for gender issue, some privileged women, they didn't actually do that. So let us moderate when we are pushing for some of those things. And lastly, let me also say that we should not really be, too much disappointed about what is going on. Is the whole world is just sick. Everywhere things are just backsliding, whether it is from the democracy, whether it is from the governance. There's so many things that have gone wrong. And I think, speaking about this will be the only way in which we can begin to redirect the debate and ensure that, we correct the wrongdoing, whether it is institutional, whether it is legal framework, whether it is the practice. Let us continue to be resilient. Let us continue to advocate and ensure that we correct some of these, things that we have even made gains in the past, and now that we are losing them. I think this is the only thing that I would say that we should keep the flag playing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think Professor Akonji could also maybe speak to some of these issues. Would you like to do that, or you want to do that in your wrap-up?
I think, yeah, once I start...
Can I just make a comment if, because I couldn't find the raise your hand button.
Yeah, why not? Yes.
All
yes,
right.
next.
I just wanted to point attention to...
and this is
Professor
Adirunke Adesanya. Okay.
Yeah. I want to point attention to what the remark of Professor Lukono concerning how the people in Nigerian House, the Senate and all that, how they push back against having bills that could promote the visibility, freedom, equality, grant some concession to women, how they push back against it. And I want to say that I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the way the political structure is created, or how we hold our political leaders accountable. Perhaps it might be nice for us to ensure that people ask for the gender policy of politicians when they are campaigning. It should be on the front burner that what is your gender policy? If you, and then, they will be held accountable for making those promises. If they fail, they'll be held accountable for it. I think we should be proactive in pushing that on the front burner. That's one. And it can be what happens in other African countries and other places of the world. What is your gender policy? Then the second issue I want to say is,
yes, sister.
Yeah, I would, this second point is important because men and women are responsible for grooming leaders of tomorrow. We have children, boys and girls, at home. It is how we train them that they end up, behaving in the future. So if you want people to be respectful and to guard fairness, equality in the public space, in the workplace, everywhere, we must ensure that we continue to train them accordingly in allocating tax at home, in promoting fairness, in speaking, in protecting, and all that.
And finally,
so we are very responsible for the outcomes, that we experience in the world. We are responsible in one way or the other. We are implicated.
Okay, so
we
can you
have
give some
duties,
space so
to
that people
perform.
can respond to you?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just come in at this point and maybe try to touch up on a couple of the questions. And if there are no other burning questions to be answered, I'll just dovetail into the wrap up.
Prof, if you don't mind, if Adamnesh could maybe say something first, because I cut her off, and then you can do the wrap up. Oh, Wale Okedino has a question or comment.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My apologies for joining late. I had issues with the time, the exact time to start. I just want to comment a bit about the issue of the low percentage of women in Nigerian, well, African parliaments, because we've been told that countries like Rwanda, and I think to some extent South Africa, they have a proportionally high percentage of women.
Tanzania.
Well, one of the things, I mean, I was a parliamentarian for a while, and I can in Nigeria, and I can say that the fault is not totally at the doorsteps of men or the government. Firstly, the high percentage of women parliamentarians in many of these countries that I mentioned are due to, I mean, by default, somehow, the apartheid struggle in South Africa knocked off so many men. And it was only the women who were around to go to the parliament. So it wasn't as if the women were very active in pushing themselves. And then secondly, that we all know that politics is a male-dominated profession, if you want to call it a profession, all over the world, not only Nigeria. And as such, and then of course, the belief by many women that you go to politics, you are endangering yourself. So what I want to come out of this is to say that we need more advocacy for women. Just like Raja said last time, we know many of these bills that have been discussed that I mentioned that were anti-women. They cannot be given on the platter of gold. No bill is given to any person on the platter of gold. You just have to fight for them. I mean, I recall when I was there as a medical doctor, I was accused of not pushing bills for medical doctors. And I said, if you don't come to the parliament to state your case, nobody will give you any attention. So my conclusion is we need more push, and we should not put all the blames at the doorstep of men. And many men are pro-women. People like us, all our children
Please,
are
can you
female.
wrap up so that we give chance
just to
to
say
the
that
panelists?
yes.
And then I also see that belatedly, some other people are making comments. So, Prof, I think we should allow this.
Well, it's 10 minutes after.
It's 10 minutes after.
10 minutes
We should
after.
allow this because I think actually that the audience participation is one of the most important aspects of this.
We are talking to one another, so I would be inclined to say, yeah, let's people talk. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, Dr. Okoye, and I'm sorry, Sir Wale Okedino, I don't know your title, so it's not a disrespectful thing.
No. I'm okay. I'm finished.
But actually, there's a lot that you said that could engage us for like 3 hours. However, to be continued. Dr. Okoye. Hello. Okay.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry I came late, but I just left in the comment what I really wanted to say about gender. We often don't look at the issue as an education and safety or security issue, but it really is one. And maybe the backlash is from men is because many of them are raised by women. My own son, one day when I was ranting about the inequity, said, but most of these men have mothers, and most of them were raised by their mothers. So the fault is not only on men, and that is true. But I also think because women are used to oppression and being suppressed, they have imbibed the idea that maybe there's something wrong with them, and the lack of awareness and education is unhelpful. We also live in extractive societies that are unsafe, and we can see it every day. So it is hard for women to make any progress or maintain the progress they have when they are unaware that they are oppressed in many cases, and even the oppression they accept as their lot in life. So I just wanted to mention that in the comments. It's not just on women, it's also on men. So the awareness is more of what we want. I don't think women hate men. Clearly they don't, or the population won't be exploding. But both genders have to, or as many genders as one accepts, have to be made aware and educated. And Africa has something to offer the world. We should not be imbibing whole what is offered to us from outside. That's all I wanted to say.
All
But
right.
this is
Thank you
lovely,
so
and I
much.
apologize for being late.
You are forgiven. And Wumi,
Any other person
Wumi
out there?
Ashubi Arodada said in response to the issue about South Africa and Rwanda that both Rwanda and South Africa had different dynamics. It's not that all the men died. So, Wumi, one sentence on what you exactly mean.
It's a lot to unpack, but I wanted to put that on the table so that Mr. Okediron can maybe read more about it. And I'm sure that I think there's a Rwandese on the call that can probably provide more resources. The thing is, Kagame himself had women in his cabinet when he was a rebel, and so it was easy. You didn't have to convince Kagame to have women participate in politics. I mean, so long as they align with him, there are other different questions about other women trying to contest now that don't align with him. So, and the women within the apartheid, not within the apartheid system, but that fought against apartheid, they were recognized within the ANC. We know the important role that Winnie Mandela also played. So that, of course, was then it transcended into the government that was created after apartheid. So because people say this a lot, they killed the men off in Rwanda. They actually killed women a lot too, and raped women and rendered them, let me use the word useless. But it's about the structures. It's about the political will, which is very lacking in Nigeria. Thank you.
There's a lot written about this actually that I would be willing to share with everybody after this is over. So thank you. The AWLN community also made a point. Would you like to speak, or should I just read your comment? So I'll begin. The comment is, I think it is important to point out that the point made by, I think, Wale Okediran, that about men being killed off by apartheid and, the Rwandan genocide caused a vacuum, and for women, that women could step in, has been empirically proven to be false. Actually, what has worked the most is quotas. That many of these countries, quota laws were passed. And it has been found also that the electoral system that is used is important. In Nigeria, we have the first past the post system, where they have, I'm hearing an echo. So where they have these proportional representative systems and strong women's movements and quotas, you have had significant progress for women. And actually, it's not just South Africa and Rwanda. A whole host of African countries are doing much better than Western countries when it comes to women's political participation being measured as percentage of women in national legislature. Of course, we can also drill down and see, is this improving the lives of ordinary women in a concrete way? Those are different questions. So, there's a lot of research. We just didn't want to bore you. It's also not factual, according to AWLN, to state that women have not pushed enough. In Nigeria, between 2002 and 2022, 11 gender-friendly bills were rejected by the male-dominated national assemblies. I have been part of some of these struggles, and I can say for sure that there's a lot of bias and a lot of desire to reinforce patriarchy in our legislature. Okay, so
I think
let
I would
us
like
hear
to
from
come in now
Professor Akonji.
to begin to concretize, to pull things
Pull the
together
threads together.
towards wrapping up. A lot of interesting perspectives have come out. The first is that there is obviously indications of backlash, but there are underlying factors. In Africa, that are fueling the backlash, even when there are quote unquote progressive means of putting women up front there. And I think that is what we really need to address. Now, for instance, like I said, data may mean nothing when you look at the nuanced factors behind data. I like the Rwandan intervention. Rwanda is like high scorer. But he has told us, like we have read, that there's underlying, well, I won't say oppression or silencing of women in the legislature. It is more of token action, which is brought about by quota system. And we have to question this idea of quota, because quota often undermines merit, and quota, of course, relates to affirmative action, which is indeed what is putting the backs of a lot of people up. So we have to ask ourselves, is it quota that women need, or a grounding, a fundamental grounding of what polity is all about, what governance is all about, what economic participation contributes to the economy before you even think of going to serve as a representative of the people? Many of the women who go on quota, even women that are, serving in the top ministries, are like token women who don't understand the fundamentals, and then they go there, they're either lame ducks or they have to play the brotherhood game in order to feel that they belong. Of course, the story of the lady in Nigeria is a good one. I won't go into that. The Aputi story, which is even resonating now. So I think that beyond representation, beyond quota, women need to know what are the issues that they are going to confront. And that is why a lot of data tells us that increased economic participation has not been coordinated or correlated with increased political participation. For instance, we found data in, I think, the main asset study, that there's a lot more progress in the leadership of women in professional areas, like in judiciary, in finance sector, people who are working on merit, who are getting there on merit. But when you go to public office, public appointment, you find that the figure drops. So what do we need? Quota, representative, just representation, just by quota, or representation that makes meaning of what we are trying to achieve, especially in terms of inclusive growth. And then on that, I think that the women have been their own enemy. I recall that the Ministry of Women Affairs rejected the recruitment of men to director level in the ministry, because they say this ministry was set up for us. Again, a man was sent to the CSW. Of course, there's a story behind that, instead of Mrs. Akoti. And there's an outcry that why should a man come to CSW? These are some of the notions that we really have to drum down and say that, look, it doesn't matter who you are. It's all about inclusive growth. It's all about bringing in people who can contribute, to progress, who can contribute to economic transformation. And on absorption of women into systems, like Dr. Diron said, in political system, even in the West, women had their first inroad into the workforce when the men went out to war. The men were fighting, job had to be done at home. So the women came on board, and of course, after the war, there was no way to drive them back home. So I think that there's some truth in what Dr. Diron said, but the fundamental thing is that women who are economically empowered should recognize that they have to deal with other issues in order to make their voice heard. A central issue that is coming up is that meritocracy is, being upheld in some spheres. Like the people from finance have said, if you look at the fintech industry, if you look at what Fawole said, that once there is merit, once there's knowledge, once there's soft skills and hard skills, the competition, kind of fades away. So I think we should look more at grooming women who want to go to represent other women. And then an important thing, why there's this discrepancy between economic participation and political participation is the problem of the care economy, the unpaid care work. A number of panel audience talk to, how are we raising boys and how are we raising girls? Once we are not raising boys to know that, gender roles are, malleable, we'll continue to have men who turn their back on unpaid work. So women who are, agile, well qualified, ready to work, also finding themselves doing the double day. And this double day kills the zeal of the women and diminish, of course, it cuts down their lifetime income and their with other stress in between. So these are some of the issues that we need to focus on. Are women's representatives really know what they are doing, what they are representing? Do they understand the issues, or they are just talking women? The issue about religion and I would call it femocracy is another major thing. This issue about quota or people just being put there on a pedestal without knowing that it's all about transforming the system in which they find themselves. The First Lady syndrome started, we know where it started, maybe in Nigeria, spread through Africa, which we call femocracy. And then many of them, they are there just because their husbands are politicians. That should not be the case. And of course, it's now going into the churches. So this is like intra-gender class war. When some women are being elevated to a position of authority just because they are occupying a married position, those things need to stop. And then, of course, the issue of power dynamics is important, no matter how we look at it. Power dynamics introduces competition even among women. There are women who are well placed, there are women who are poorer. So oftentimes when you have improvement in the lives of women in the upper classes, you have decline in the livelihoods of women in the lower hierarchies. Talk about domestic work. You find that more women are getting jobs, but the lower class women are getting jobs in the informal sector, domestic work, and so on, while the upper class women are getting all the opportunities. How do we bridge these power gaps among women? You see that I've been talking a lot about what women can do for women before we start talking about men attacking women or blocking women. We have to fix our own system. We have to, represent women in a way that is meaningful for other women. Finally, I think that the outcome of this whole thing, because there's been a lot said. Let me just talk about something that Dr. Larry did say, that when is this gender equality, when is the parity going to be achieved? I used to wonder that when I started on this journey. Is it going to be an eternal journey fighting for gender equality? And so it is no surprise that after 50, 60 years, we're still talking about getting to the end goal. We are not going to get to that end goal, and we may not really achieve that end goal because there are structural inequalities along the way that need to be addressed, especially centering of the care work across the divide of male and female. As long as we don't address that, we will continue to pursue gender equality until eternity. We've taken a lot of notes on this forum, and we're going to document more, than we have even talked about here, and hopefully share with all the participants. And that's going to determine what we do, what are the priorities that are coming out of this discourse. How real is the backlash? Where is it occurring? Which sectors is it occurring most? And so on and so forth. So we're going to scale up and begin to look at sectoral perspective of this backlash, because whatever it is, backlash or whatever, is always contextual. We always have to put context in place, and that is what we're going to do next, so that we can upscale our decisions, our outcomes, our recommendations to the appropriate institutional level. Well, without much ado, we have 3 minutes to go, and I think it's time to just start saying thank you. Thank you to all the amazing panelists that have joined us today. We benefited from your expertise. We have not chosen wrong, and we would call you next time. We have a lot of amazing people in the audience. We are going to look out for you next time because we know we have a lot of perspective out there that we need to share. We thank you all for sparing 2.5 hours on a lazy Saturday morning to join us on this forum, and we really appreciate that. And Professor Mujuba Olu, I said it, my moderator is a tough cookie, and she's a very well-informed personality. So the partnership with TAD Lab, the Africa Disruption Lab, is not in vain. We're going to continue that partnership and also draw on the partnership of other like-minded organizations. Let's come together and speak out to the issues. Enough of armchair criticism. Nothing should be out of range. Nothing should have boundary when it comes to the realm of truism. Let's talk among ourselves, sift the issues, touch on the most important actions that need to be taken, and get it to the policy table so that policies can be reinvented for inclusion that leaves no one behind. I think that is the journey we should be trying to make. Policies that leave no one behind, not just women, but all marginalized groups. I'll stop now, and
I want to say thank you and happy birthday to you, because you've reached that 70, and we celebrate with you and look forward to the success of your fireside chats and your policy interventions. I just want to say that actually I'm not against quotas at all. Men are failing woefully. Nobody measures the men's failures the way they laser focus on women. You know, there are many men that know nothing and they're occupying seats of power. And people do not criticize them the way they criticize women, who not only have the public roles they're playing, but private roles that they're playing that supports humanity. So listen, I'm for quotas, and I also believe in excellence in representation. So let's also put the men, let's put their feet to the fire. They also need to do a better job and be good stewards of the opportunities given them to lead, because many of them are failing. But I'm not against men. Actually, I'm the only woman in my family. My children are boys and men. You know, I think there's need for gender equality, but we should be frank. Society is riding on the backs of women, and they're supposed to just be calm, pretty, and soft-spoken, and not look for ways of ameliorating the and also using the skills they have. If you include women, you are going to make money. There's statistics that show that. So if we want to be poor forever, step on women. So thank you very much.
Professor Okome, a feminist for the feminists forever, but we're African feminists and we're also sensitive to African realities. Of course, there's a lot of Stockholm syndrome in the attitude of women who actually think it's okay to be bossed around. But I tell you, a lot, especially the younger women, are coming up with a different attitude. And so merit is beginning to overcome mediocrity. Like somebody said, men have been thriving on mediocrity because they've had the upper hand. Now it is the time for merit, and women are our young girls. They are up to the task. Thank you, everybody, again. Otherwise, we will not have lunch today.
All right, everybody. Thank you. God bless you, and have a pleasant weekend.
Happy birthday,
especially the
advance.
birthday people.
Thank you. I don't mind a happy birthday song.
Oh, let's sing happy birthday to Prof. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to
Happy
birthday
to you.
Hey, where have you been?
Happy birthday. Happy birthday
Happy
to you.
birthday to you.
The Ides of March have come.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my birthday and all gone.
Happy birthday,
Dr.
Auntie.
Bola,
Happy
my birthday
birthday,
was late.
Bola.
You are welcome late.
Happy birthday,
Yes.
Bola.
Bye.
Wumi,
Bye.
if you
Bye. Nice.
Bye.
We had a
Bye-bye.
nice
if you are
time.
still there,
Tola
please let me
Popola,
know.
thank you.
We
Bye
will start
bye.
charging the people who
You're
are meeting
welcome,
their
ma.
people online.